Picture this. It's 1917, and one of the world's most powerful empires, the Russian Empire, which had stood for 300 years under the Romanov dynasty, just evaporates. I mean, it doesn't just lose a war, it completely disintegrates. So what on earth could cause such a colossal empire to just crumble? Well, that's what we're here to find out.
You know, this quote just nails the sheer speed of it all. It's like a giant just disappeared. But of course, giants don't just vanish into thin air. They're brought down. And the story of Russia's fall is really a perfect storm of military disaster, political rot, and just unbelievable human suffering.
And that's the big question we're tackling today. What forces came together with such explosive power that they could literally wipe a centuries-old institution right off the map? Well, it all starts with a war that Russia was completely unprepared to fight.
World War I. This was the match that lit the whole powder keg. For Russia, it was a catastrophe on a scale that's almost hard to wrap your head around. It was a conflict that exposed every single weakness of the Tsarist regime, and then some.
So take a look at this map from 1914. You can just see how massive the Russian Empire was. It was part of the Triple Entente, allied with France and Great Britain, and when the war started, Russia went in with a huge army and a big wave of patriotism. But beneath that surface, the whole state was incredibly brittle, and this war was about to shatter it. The human cost alone was just staggering.
To fight the Central Powers, that's mainly Germany and Austria-Hungary, Russia mobilized a number that's almost unthinkable, over 15 million of its own people. Think about that. That was about 10% of the entire population put into uniform.
And here's where it gets truly devastating. Of those 15 million, almost 8 million became casualties, killed, wounded, or captured. That is more than half of every single person they sent to fight. To put that another way, the losses were so bad, they had to basically replace the entire army 3 times over. By September of 1915, this human tragedy was now a full-blown military disaster. The army had been shoved back 300 miles, losing massive territories like Poland and Galicia. But you see, while the war was being lost at the front, it was also rotting the empire from the inside out.
So while millions are suffering and dying at the front, what's happening back in the capital, Petrograd? Well, the government was spiraling into a crisis of incompetence and mistrust that would turn out to be just as deadly as the war itself.
And this, right here, is a crucial point. Tsar Nicholas II makes the absolutely disastrous decision to go lead the army himself from the front. This creates a huge power vacuum back home, leaving his German-born wife, the Empress Alexandra, more or less in charge. And her deep reliance on the mystic Grigory Rasputin, well, it just fueled all these toxic rumors and completely destroyed the monarchy's credibility at the worst possible moment.
And this breakdown wasn't just political drama at the top. The entire system was collapsing. The massive effort to supply the war front completely wrecked the economy back home. The railway system seized up, which meant food couldn't get to the cities. The currency became worthless, so farmers just stopped selling their grain. And the result? Starvation. Famine in the major industrial cities, like the capital itself.
Which brings us to the breaking point for the person at the very heart of this, the average Russian soldier. These were overwhelmingly peasants, men who had been traditionally loyal to the Tsar for centuries, but World War I pushed them way, way beyond their limits.
This quote from the historian John L. H. Keep, it just says it all. These soldiers were stuck in endless, pointless trench warfare against a German army that was way better equipped. They were dealing with horrific casualties, terrible shortages, and that legendary loyalty, it finally just snapped.
I mean, just try to imagine what this does to an army. Discipline completely evaporated. Soldiers were deserting in droves, and officers who were once symbols of authority were now terrified of being shot in the back by their own angry, desperate men. The army wasn't a fighting force anymore. It was a huge, exhausted, and starving mob of very angry men.
Okay, so this is it. This is the moment where all these threads, the military defeat, the chaos at home, the soldiers' absolute misery, it all comes together and just explodes. In late February 1917, the city of Petrograd goes up in flames.
And things happen so fast it'll make your head spin. It all starts with protests over bread shortages. The Tsar orders his troops to suppress them, but when the soldiers are told to fire on the crowds, the unthinkable happens. The soldiers of the Petrograd garrison, the very men meant to defend the regime, they mutiny. They switch sides and join the revolution. And that That was the fatal blow. Within days, the Tsar abdicates. The 300-year-old dynasty is over. A shaky new government takes its place, but the chaos is far from over.
And you know what's really incredible about this? The thing you have to remember? This wasn't some planned coup led by revolutionaries like Lenin. In fact, he was in exile and was caught completely by surprise. No, this was a leaderless, spontaneous uprising of a desperate people and a completely broken army. The regime wasn't overthrown, it just dissolved.
But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. The new government made a fatal mistake. It chose to keep Russia in the war. This decision was, as you can imagine, deeply unpopular. And just 8 months later, a radical socialist group, the Bolsheviks, led by a newly returned Lenin, they seized power in a second revolution. Their promise was simple: peace, land, and bread. But actually delivering on that peace, well, it came at a staggering price. So Lenin's new government was desperate to consolidate power, and they had to end the bloodshed that was tearing the country apart. So they signed this treaty with Germany. It officially pulled Russia out of World War I, but the terms were just brutal. Germany saw how weak Russia was and forced them to give away huge chunks of their former empire.
Just look at these numbers. I mean, they're absolutely staggering. The Bolsheviks signed away a third of their population, a third of their farmland, over half of all their industrial plants, and nearly all of the country's coal mines. It was a humiliating, devastating price to pay for peace, and it really shows you just how completely the war had broken the Russian state.
And this leaves us with this one massive, lingering question. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk did end the war with Germany. That's true. But it plunged Russia into a new, and you could argue even more brutal conflict, a bloody civil war. So it makes you wonder, was signing this treaty a masterstroke that saved the new regime? Or was it simply the opening act of Russia's next great tragedy?